Oberlin Dems that are here and some special guests that are here, the candidates that are here as well. It's always great to be back in Lorain County and to Oberlin. You never have to twist my arm to come to Oberlin and visit. Even with this lovely weather that you're having outside, although it does look like a nice winter wonderland here. The snow has been on the ground for quite a while where I am, but it doesn't look quite so nice as it does here. So you must have gotten fresh snow over the last couple of days. For those of you who do not know me, I am Allison Russo. I am a state representative in the Ohio House of Representatives, so in the Ohio General Assembly down in Columbus. I get to serve with my wonderful colleague, Representative Joe Miller. Actually, he and I came into the House together in 2019. We started serving, and we are both in our last year in the Ohio House. In the Ohio General Assembly, we are term limited. Unlike Congress, we are term limited, and so if you're in the House or the Senate, you serve 8 years max in both of those chambers. So we are both in our last year and have both decided to do this some more. And he's going to run for state senate, and I am now running statewide for Secretary of State. I'm going to just, start from the beginning, and some of you have probably heard this story before, but I'm going to share it again because I think it's important to understand, who your candidates are and why they fight for the things that they fight for. I always call myself the accidental politician. I ran for the first time in 2018. I never planned to run for office, so being a state representative in the legislature is my first elected office, and ran as a first-time candidate in 2018. The legislative seat that I ran for in 2018 was actually held by a Republican. And I flipped that seat from Republican to Democrat. How we did it, but I want you to know that one of the reasons I was able to do that was because of timing and the moment of time that we were in. And 2018, if you will recall, was Trump's first midterm, very similar to what we are in right now in this moment in 2026. And a lot of people were very deeply disturbed about what was happening in Washington. I would say we're even more disturbed now in 2026. But it was because of that energy and enthusiasm and organizing that was happening all across Ohio that I was able to flip the seat that I ran in. And in fact, in the state legislature, we had 5 others, so 6 total state legislative seats that flipped that year, which was a historic number. And we saw all across the country gains made in these congressional races as well because of the moment of time that we were in. So I'll get to that moment, why I think that's important for 2026. I always have to clarify when I'm in this part of the state, my last name is Russo. I am not related to any Russo that you know. I do not come from a political family. Russo is my married name, and my husband's family is from Western New York. If you hear a little bit of a Southern accent, it is not imagined. I was actually born and raised not in Southern Ohio, not in Kentucky. I say just keep on driving further south until you get to the state of Mississippi. And I was born and raised, I was born and raised in a small town in Mississippi. And for those of you who come from tiny towns, maybe outside of Oberlin and more rural parts of this county, or if you grew up in another county, you will appreciate what I'm about to say. My high school was so small that I was one of 35 graduating seniors, and K through 12 was all in the same building. That's how tiny the town was. And I actually did not live in town. We lived out of town. About 20 minutes away, and I had to drive to town to do anything, to go to school for us really to have civilization at all. And to this day, I sometimes will say, I've got to go into town to do, whatever. And my husband will say, honey, we're already in town. You're not driving into town. So that habit dies hard. But I my mother, she married young. She had me when she was quite young. By the time she was 21, she found herself a single mom with 2 little girls to raise. My sister and I are only 15 months apart. And she only had a GED education at the time. And so, like many people that we know in many of our communities, many people in your family, she had to do whatever she could to make ends meet, to put food on the table, to keep a roof over our heads. And sometimes that worked out, sometimes it didn't. We spent a lot of times going back and forth to my grandmother's house as well. And had to work these odd jobs to do that. And she cleaned houses and office buildings. My favorite job that she had, she worked as an attendant at a gas station. And of course, on those wages, she could not afford childcare. So that meant that my sister and I got to go to work with her and sit behind the counter. And we thought that was the best thing ever because we had, every treat that we could possibly imagine in the gas station, including all of the honey buns that we could possibly want. I now know it was because they were cheap, that my mom would give them to us, and I'm sure we were a nightmare by the end of that. But when I was about 5 years old, she got an opportunity to join an apprenticeship program with the local carpenters union. And so my mother trained to be a carpenter, and for many years she was the only woman on a construction job site working in that skilled labor. And as you can imagine, in the 80s, being the only woman on a work site was very challenging in many different ways. But to this day, my mother will still say that was the job and the opportunity that saved our lives, because it moved us from poverty to middle class life. And for the first time, she was able to have stable wages, she had benefits, and she was able to buy our first home. Now, my mother, she went on and slowly, at community colleges and with stops and starts along the way, was able to eventually earn her college degree. And she moved on to another profession. And then much later, when I was an adult, she actually went on and earned her advanced degrees. And because we're in a college town right now, you will appreciate that she retired 2 years ago as a university professor, working in the space of preventative health. Now, my mom, for my sister and I, and eventually my brother who came along, she felt very strongly that education was our pathway to opportunity. And so I am a proud product of public schools, was able, fortunately, to go on to college, putting all the things together to make it affordable for my family. Pell Grants, subsidized student loans, scholarships, work study, whatever it took to get there and stay there. And I always joke that my degree was in probably the furthest thing from politics that you could possibly imagine. I actually have a degree in microbiology, okay? And went on and got graduate degrees in public health, and eventually I was able to earn a doctoral degree as well and work in the field of public health policy. And spent 20 plus years of my profession before I ever got involved in politics and running for office, working on health issues, policy, payment issues, quality issues, especially as it related to military families, veterans, some of our vulnerable populations, and seniors. But in 2016, for me, on election night, I happened to be up with my daughter, who's the youngest of my 3 kids, and at the time my daughter was only 6 weeks old. And so I was up watching those election results come back in 2016. And like many people probably in this room, deeply concerned about what I was seeing. And I remember on that evening making a promise to my daughter and to myself. Because up to that point, I would describe myself as an engaged and informed voter, okay? I understood why voting was important. What I didn't tell you was when my husband and I first got married, some of you from Avon will recall my husband and I just celebrated our 25th anniversary because we did it in Avon at their tent meeting. But my husband, when we first got married, for the first several years, we were a military family. He was active duty Air Force. We moved all across the country. We moved overseas. He was deployed. We were those people who had to cast our votes from overseas and from out of state because of his service. We understood deeply why voting is important, what American democracy, up until now, what American democracy has meant to the rest of the world and being that beacon on the hill. But in 2016, I was an engaged and informed voter. Had absolutely nothing to do with politics. I didn't think about it beyond, casting my vote. But on that evening, watching those results, I made a promise to myself and my daughter, never again will I stay on the sidelines. And I had no idea on that night what that meant. No idea. Didn't know what that meant. I certainly did not guess that that would mean that I would run for office. But I knew that it wasn't enough. And so what happened, as happened with many people across this country in 2017, I started connecting with other people who I call it the Great Awakening, that many people were having that year. We had, these local indivisible groups that formed all across the country. Many people were stepping up and for the first time reaching out to their member of Congress and reaching out to their state representatives. And my role, because of my background in training and experience in health policy, was, if you will recall, in 2017, there were incredible attacks that were happening. Here we are again, happening against the Affordable Care Act. There were attacks in the State House against the Medicaid expansion that Ohio had successfully implemented.